Okay, we're
There's
good.
always a little delay.
All right, so it is 10:03. We'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Inspector Advisory Committee to order. If you want to do a roll call, please.
Okay, I'll do that. Lee Warren,
Here.
Sean,
Here.
Steve. He's here. Bruce Carpenter,
Here.
Brian,
Here.
Barbara. I saw her. Mike Morgan,
Here.
Dave Motley,
Here.
Scott Regan.
Here.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you. Number 2, any housekeeping items?
All I would say is if you're going to, if you need to speak on something, just raise your hand. We will really try to monitor the chat to make sure that we can recognize you. But if for some reason your hand is raised for a while and we don't recognize you, just pipe in real quick. Oh, looks like Steve Reinhardt has his hand raised. Yes, Mr. Reinhardt.
Can you hear me there?
We can.
Okay.
You're a little low, but we can hear you.
Okay. I was just trying.
All right, we lost your audio, Steve.
Okay, that second one wasn't a better choice. Okay.
Yeah.
And Tony, I would just add for everyone to be muted unless you want to speak. That helps us with interference quite a bit.
Yes.
And to not use the chat really for anything other than, hey, I'm having an issue with XYZ technology wise. But yeah, that raise hand function is really good. I will say sometimes I don't see it. So if you feel like you're not being seen, I think Tony's right. Just kind of speak up and say, hey, my hand is up. That's it.
But just to reiterate what Vanessa says, if there's chats happening on the side and it's not part of the dialogue, it becomes difficult to have that be on the record. So we need that to be on the record, and you guys need to talk about that rather than having little chats off to the side about stuff. So again, if for some reason you can't communicate, say something in the chat and we'll try to get that figured out. But otherwise, let's have the conversations in the meeting on the call.
All right, sounds good. Remarks from the chair. I don't really have anything too big. Hopefully we'll start, this will be our last meeting where we have to do it virtually. Ideally, we can have our next one in person, which would be really great. Looking forward to that. And I greatly appreciate everybody kind of dealing with the times and everybody's ability to kind of change and be adaptable to this. I know it's not the ideal situation, but we still got business to conduct. And unfortunately, everybody's been pretty good on adapting to the time. So thank you everybody for that. So discussion and possible action to excuse committee members, if any. I don't think we have any that are absent, so I think we're okay there. Ratification of the minutes of the January 15, 2021 meeting. Is there anybody who has any suggested modifications to those minutes? All right. Hearing none, those will stand ratified. General comments from visitors or written comments on non-agenda items. If you are a guest and have an item comment on a non-agenda item, please go ahead and state that now or raise your hand. Okay, hearing none. We'll move on. Reports from subcommittees. Education subcommittee, please. Still can't hear you, Steve.
You're muted, Steve.
Technology. Sorry about that. The Education Subcommittee has not met as a subcommittee since our last meeting.
Okay. And we have a lot coming up from you guys today anyway with the SOP course. So I know you guys have worked really hard on that.
But yeah, as separate from the subcommittee, it's a working group committee. So that,
okay.
And I would say fairly active. I think both Jennifers would probably, attest to that.
Okay. Standards of practice subcommittee.
You're muted, Sean.
Muted, Sean. Sean, you're muted.
It's all right.
Sorry, we met a bunch of times since the last meeting. I don't know how many times, 3 or 4, and we'll have a bunch to report later on in the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. All right, staff reports, executive division.
Chelsea, do you want me to start?
I'll start. I just was slow to unmute. I apologize. And then Tony, let me know if there's anything that I've missed. I'm sure there is. And you just fill in. We've been at the Capitol, getting our nose swabs and being ready to testify when necessary. I have found that as long as you are overly prepared to testify, the committee will have no questions for you, and that has proven true. So we've been waiting in the wings. It's very helpful to be there and to just have some of those conversations in the back of the room, in the hallways, that while you're waiting for your bill to be heard. So that's been very productive. I think Tony and I both feel like we didn't expect there to be much happening this session in terms of things touching our areas, but that we've been proven wrong on that front. The executive committee of our commission met last week and made a determination that we will meet in person with some remote presence at the May commission meeting. That commission meeting is on May 3rd with a workshop the following day on the 4th. So that's a big step for us. There will be an opportunity for remote presence for both those who need to participate in the meeting and then those who just want to watch the meeting. If you want to only watch the meeting, you do that the way that you always have, which is just through the internet on our website. If you want to participate in the meeting, we'll be working with those who need to provide public testimony, and then Lee, for you to provide your report if you want to do that remotely. We'll have a link to do that. So we're working out all the logistics on that front. But we did a survey of our commissioners, and they're very interested in getting back in person. So I think we will. I suspect that that the commissioners will be there, and of course it will be open to the public, but that because it's accessible to the public remotely, that most will participate that way. We remain, we don't have any, well, I'll say we have one remnant remaining involving COVID that changes our productivity levels, but for the most part, we are operating and providing all of our work just as we did pre-COVID. In that our mail is being processed 5 days a week, and the way that I've said it is that we are past the point of being able to use COVID as any excuse for any lack of productivity. Our one exception to that is that we continue to allow mail to sit for a 48-hour period to just let any germs die before touching it. And so there's that 48-hour lag. But other than that, we would call, for purposes of productivity, COVID behind us. We're working on some operational changes just to apply what we've learned during COVID in terms of allowing for a more robust remote work policy, but that's in the works. And will remain in transition in terms of where people are working, likely through the summer, just to accommodate families with young children and that type of thing. But I'm proud of our agency's ability to just be productive and learn from this just incredibly unique experience. Tony, what have I missed?
I just wanted to give them an update on the 2 bills, inspector-related bills.
Go for it.
Other than that, you haven't missed anything.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so there are 2, as we've talked about previously, there are 2 inspector-related bills that were part of the agency's strategic plan. well, at least one of them was the recovery fund, repeal of the inspector recovery fund. But the other issue was based on the sunset recommendation to try to streamline things, and that is to repeal the real estate inspector license. Both of those bills are moving. The recovery fund bill has actually passed the House, it's passed on the local calendar, so it should be on its way to the Senate at some point. The other bill is being recommended for local calendar. It has not been heard on the House floor yet. Just so everybody understands the way that real estate inspector license repeal works is anybody who currently has a real estate inspector license, that's not going to change how they operate. They can still renew that license should that bill pass. They can still do everything that they're authorized to do under that license. They can upgrade if they need to. All of that stuff is still in place. The only thing that changes is the agency would no longer be accepting new real estate inspector applications. So you still could be an apprentice, and the way it works is you go from an apprentice. If you go the traditional pathway, the sponsorship pathway, you go from an apprentice straight to a professional real estate inspector. So the professional real estate inspector license obviously is still in place. The apprentice for anyone who wants to sponsor apprentices is still in place, but that middle license, and we only have, I think, 140 of those in the state right now out of the 4,000 plus inspectors we have. That will no longer be receiving new applications should that bill go forward. And then I'll happy to answer any questions about that if anybody has any.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So what about those who are in the pipeline to become real estate inspectors? If this bill passes, I assume they will still have the opportunity to become real estate inspectors up to a certain age.
There's a year, because applications are up for a year, there's a year after the date of the effective date of the statute by which the license would go away. So they still have that year application process. So if they're in the pipeline to do it, they have a year to finish that application and get licensed as a real estate inspector after the bill goes into effect.
All right.
Yeah, we didn't want that to mess with anybody who was currently on that pathway, nor did we want to have people that are, currently licensed to have to rush to get an upgraded license if that's not what they wanted to do. So it's fairly simple in maintaining that license since there's so few of them. It's not a big burden on the agency. And then the recovery fund, just to give you guys just a quick brief update on that. Should that bill pass, there's a process by which that will be wound down. So a certain amount of that money would be sent to general revenue, and then the agency would set aside another amount to pay any outstanding liabilities should they arise. And then what is left over from that, there'd be an amount refunded to current license holders that have paid into the fund. And then the remaining amount of the fund would also be sent to GR after that. So, and then the only financial requirement that inspectors would have after that would be to maintain the insurance, the statutory insurance requirement. That's it.
Okay. All right, next, Truck Enforcement Division.
Good morning.
Morning, Mike.
How's everyone doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right. So this is we've only done 3 cases since we last met. And then the next 2 pages are what we've done for the past fiscal year. I think some are pretty straightforward. And if you need any feedback in regards to what we started doing, I guess it would have been kind of the fall, getting the orders in advance. Any issues on that, please let me know. I hope that's working for you guys, so you at least get an idea of what these orders are before, at least at the same time as they're going out to, the commissioners and stuff, and then eventually posted on the website. So you'll get at least a little minor advance noticed.
I can tell you, I do appreciate that. Not only that, but the fact that the agreed orders are clickable and you can go right to the agreed orders. I think that helps a lot too. But I will say thank you very, very, very much for sending those, because I have on, I think the 3 that came through, on 2 of them, I got calls about somebody going, what's the deal? Obviously, nobody's worried about the use of the current form, but you know, the other 2 I got calls on, but fortunately I had seen those emails come through and I, you know, had that information prior to somebody calling. I tell you, that helps out dramatically to be able to know exactly what somebody is questioning before that actually happens. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I know it's an extra step, but I do appreciate it.
It's not an inconvenience. I'm glad that's working out for you. So.
Is that all you got, Mike?
That is all I have, sir.
All right, thank you. Education and examinations.
Good morning. Good to see everybody again. Before you is the fiscal year to date data for both qualifying and continuing education courses. What's not reflected here yet is what we approved in March. And I just wanted to give you all this brief update that we have had 4 education providers that have the entire revised curriculum approved and available. Our website has been updated to reflect the current course requirement and is searchable. We have both classroom and distance education options available for students in the new curriculum.
Fantastic.
And we have about 3 other providers that we know that are preparing the new material as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming Champions is one of the 4, right?
They are. They have distance and classroom approved.
Yeah, I have. I already know somebody who's just about to start that new process, so I'm kind of watching that closely. So
good. Good. Yeah, I would love that feedback. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Jennifer?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Licensing division.
Good morning. I'm Denise Sample, Licensing Director, and I've got report information for you guys through February. So this first report shows the total number of applications received, and the real estate inspectors application data and renewal information is at the bottom of the report, and we have seen an increase in the number of applications received over this time last year. So not sure what that tells you, but we are definitely seeing more batches, more applications coming in. To kind of piggyback off of what Jen mentioned earlier about the providers of the new course requirements, we've received 1 application and processed 1 so far, where the applicant has completed everything but the practicum with the provider and completing the new coursework. So we're kind of excited to see more of those coming in. The next report is the license holder and registrant status. The inspector numbers are listed right in the center of the report, and as Tony mentioned, we've got just over 140 real estate inspectors. This breaks them down by rank, so we've got a total of 4,271 inspectors. That includes active and inactive. That's through the end of February. The next report is the graphical presentation of that large table of numbers, and real estate inspectors are towards the center there in yellow. The next report shows our average number of calendar days to process an application. So through the end of February, it's taking us about 10 days to process a professional inspector application, 7.5 days for a real estate inspector application, and we don't have any that have been completed yet for an apprentice, so that's why there's no data there. We expect to see, just based on the 1 application that came under the new requirements, we hope to see these numbers go down, and it take us a lot less time to process a single application under the new requirements. But the bulk of the ones that are coming in are still, individuals who started the previous coursework by March 1st. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
I noticed our renewal activity is substantially higher now than it was in fiscal year 19. So and we aren't even through this full fiscal year. We already have double the amount shown there, which is
and we've kind of made some changes on the back end that should help with that renewal process. I hope that that's kind of the experience you guys are having as you renew your licenses. The CE providers are transmitting that information electronically. So it's directly loaded into our database. So we no longer need to kind of cull through, the 6 or 7 course certificates that come in with a renewal. So I believe that is kind of streamlining the process. Not sure if that explains the increase in the numbers, but it should be a smoother process for inspectors who are renewing.
I know I renewed last year, and that was probably the quickest renewal I've ever seen. I think I put all my information in on all 3 licenses on Friday, and my inspector stuff came in Sunday.
Nice.
So it was like within 2 days, even on a weekend. So that was a very good sign. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you very much, Denise.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to item number 9. I was originally going to move this below, but after going through the materials, I don't think we need to. So we'll just go on with number 9, discussion and possible action regarding course materials for the Inspector Legal Ethics and SOP Review course.
Lee, if I may introduce this just briefly.
Please.
The course materials were sent to you separately. They're not part of the meeting materials. The subject matter experts who participated in the writing group are Fred Buck, Mike Morgan, Brian Murphy, and Stephen Reinhardt. And then before you get into the details of the course materials, I just wanted to first apologize for an omission on the acknowledgements page. But it has been updated in our copy of the draft to add Brian Carroll and Bruce Carpenter to the list of inspectors in this committee. So I apologize for that oversight, but it has been corrected on our end. So the next version of the materials that you see will reflect that.
Perfect. All right, so on this course, I'm assuming everybody had a chance to go through it. I can tell you, I kind of feel like I should get my 8 hours credit for going through this. I'm just going to say that right now because, I mean, the whole point of taking the course is to understand it, and I've spent a lot more than 8 hours going through this darn thing, but that's a side note we can talk about another time. Jennifer, I sent you just a list. I don't want to go over in this meeting the little typographical errors. I don't feel that's very prudent. I mean, you just kind of see that and it's fine. But I did have a few questions on page, and I'll pull this up. On page 17, it states that the inspector should sign the agreement. And I hadn't heard that one before. I was just kind of curious about that. Let me get down there.
And I think we'll defer to those subject matter experts that participated in the writing group for feedback on those questions, Lee. Thank you for sending those, and thank you for acknowledging the typos that we need to correct. I know that by the end of the day, both Jennifer Gruby and I were kind of going cross-eyed. So those things are helpful, but yeah, I'll let the subject matter experts speak to your questions.
I take it you're leaning towards me there. What page was that on?
17.
17.
Yeah, 17, paragraph that starts in conclusion. The very last one says sign and date the report.
Is this on the legal and ethics SOP file or the manual?
Yeah, the PDF file that was sent to us. The very last thing on page 17.
Oh, wait a second. 17 of the file or 17?
Yeah, 17 of the file. It's page 9 of the actual book.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I just wasn't aware that signing the report was something we were supposed to do.
Yeah, well, that's in module 1 about the inspection. Module 1 was kind of a group effort between information that Brian had and Jennifer, which is the report. Let me see why that would have been there. I think, well, yeah, I that's a good question. I didn't catch that.
There's no requirement on the report form for a signature.
No.
There's no place for a signature.
No, header on page 1, it has the date, name,
Right.
all that detailed information, but there's not a place to sign. I have seen some people put a signature in there, but,
Mhm.
okay, so that goes on my list of notes here to check.
Cool. So if we can
I think-
modify that.
I think the sponsoring inspector is supposed to sign. I think that's the only time we're required to. There's supposed to be a signature by the sponsoring inspector if, I think, I don't know.
I
I don't
thought-
recall I don't recall them having to sign it. I think that they have to be on that very first page as the
Yeah.
sponsoring
Yeah.
broker.
It's
Yeah,
just the
there's
name.
no, I don't
sponsors-
believe there's any requirement for a signature on the report
Okay.
form. I mean, you have to fill out the information on that, on the first page, and it has to be accurate, but I don't, unless Mike, Mike Malloy, you know something differently, but I don't believe there's a requirement for a signature
No, I
on the
think-
report.
I think that might be I might be getting the WDI confused. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that should just be modified to say, somehow talk about it, making sure that all the information on there is accurate, like that
Yep.
part of the form. I think that's an
Yeah.
easy fix.
Yeah,
I've got that on the to-do list, yeah. I
perfect.
started a whole new binder just for to-do list off of this.
All right, my
And
next
I'm
one.
also documenting the changes, so
Okay,
we'll be covered.
All right, so my next one was on file page 26, which is page number 18 of the manual. Little d number 2, reviewing any written inspection report prepared. I know it sounds stupid. Should we say any or should we say all, just to make sure? Any almost implies that it could be one or this one or that one. But if we say review all written inspection reports, then I think it's a little clearer.
I think that's an easy fix. Let's just do it. I
Yeah,
think that's
okay.
easy.
Okay.
That's non-substantive, but I agree with you. It just is clearer.
Let's see, page 33 in the file, which is 25. The answer to number 1. The sponsoring inspector does not need to be present, but a minimum, a license inspector needs to be there. Should we clarify just the license type? A qualified real estate inspector or professional inspector, just to make sure that's clear on that license. Like I said, I just don't want somebody saying any licensed inspector can do that.
and I think we had the discussion a few years ago that an apprentice is not considered a licensed inspector in the sense, and so.
They're not.
Yeah, so the answer is a licensed inspector, which by definition is a real estate or professional.
Okay.
Yeah, an apprentice is a separate license type. A licensed inspector would be one of those other two.
Now that would and some of this in here, those are type of questions that people in the class would take and that the instructor would be able, these are discussion, these are actually in the instructor notes. So hopefully the instructor would know that and maybe be able to, and probably get a question like, I think, but the question was, and the belief was it had to be the sponsor. Well, any licensed inspector can supervise an apprentice. And the question always was, would those apprenticing hours count towards the minimum requirements to get your license? And the answer at the time was no, that it would be an experience you would gain, but it wouldn't be counted unless it's your sponsor towards the minimum requirements.
Okay. On page 39, page 31 of the materials, the second paragraph under CSST, identification of the particular CSST system in the inspection report assists blah, blah, blah. Reading this tells me, if I'm reading this, it comes across to me that we're requiring the inspector to identify the specific type of CSST, not just the fact that it is CSST. Am I just reading that wrong?
Well, I think our intent was the types of materials, iron, CSST, PVC, whatever you see. I don't know if our intent was, you're thinking of specific manufacturer's type or.
Like black versus yellow.
Right.
Well, not so much that, but a certain model of black or.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think that was our intent. Maybe that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, because I think that's how that reads.
Yeah, and some of those will refer back to the person that wrote that to see if that was their intent. I don't think from staff that was ever an intent. I think our intent is to be able to identify, like my house, I got yellow CSST, I've got some black lightning strike stuff, I've got steel. And the idea is just whatever you see, kind of like materials, what do you see?
I mean, even if we just said identification, get rid of the words the particular, say identification of CSST system in the inspection report, I think would make that clearer. But as that reads, it makes it sound like you have to identify that the inspector is being asked to identify the specific type of CSST.
And there's something to that because some people, you know, there's an argument that there's some that doesn't need bonding and some that does. And, you know, it's kind of one of those where our intent was to probably to identify what you know, what you see. Because a lot of times you'll see a piece or a segment of the pipe and it won't have the writing on it. So you can't tell. But if you can, you know, I don't know, I'll get with the, we'll put that on our note and just see how in depth. What would, as far as the committee, the answer would be, how far do you want to go on the committee on identifying the type? Just the material type or manufacturer or model type?
Just the material.
Just the material.
Black, yellow, steel, is that what we're talking?
I think just the fact that CSST is present was,
Yeah.
I think,
I agree.
Okay. So if it's all steel, doesn't mean there isn't any concealed flex, but you're just reporting what you see
Right.
without rooting through everything. Okay.
okay. So then my next one, page 40, smart home devices. Says when it talks about when they are part of the property, it kind of implies that any smart device must be inspected, like a motion sensor, water leak sensors, those types of things. That seems to be a bit above and beyond.
I think our belief was to say that we don't have to if they're part of, because I mean, how many of us are getting to irrigation controls or HVAC controls, and there's no physical control. It's a box that obviously is an app on a phone or a pad. And the idea is, if that's the case, we can't manually test it. We don't have to. And I thought that's what
So smart home automation components are identified as general limitation. Inspectors are not required to inspect.
Yeah.
However, if an inspector chooses not to inspect, this should be disclosed to the client prior to performing the inspection.
Yeah, because the belief there is we're not talking, you know, an Alexa or something like that. We're talking a smart home component that is a required item in the home inspection. So obviously, if it's a required part of the SOP to check the thermostat or, you know, some component, and it's a smart component, it would be a limitation. You know, we couldn't inspect it because I don't have that app on my phone and I don't know how it works and I don't want to mess it up. That was the idea of that page. If it's not clear, we can tweak it a little.
Okay. All right, that was all I had on there. The rest of it is all typo stuff, which I sent to Jennifer, so I won't bog everybody down with that. Did anybody else have it? Sorry, go ahead.
You read through all 112 pages. I am impressed.
That's what we're supposed to do. I mean, this is a course that's going to be for the next 2 years.
Oh yeah. And it will have mistakes. It'll have things that we can update before it even gets, you know, even once it gets through and then we find something. I mean, with that much information, there's going to be things.
No, I look at it as I've heard the instructors of the current course have complaints or issues with how that one is laid out and whatnot. And with this one really being the first time that we as an entity are really doing this ourselves, just want to make sure it was as nice and tidy as possible. Did
it kind of flow right? The 8 different modules and how you read through it?
I thought it was very comprehensive. I think it goes through very well.
Okay.
So there's a timing component to this because it needs to be updated by September 1st of this year. So, and Vanessa, I'll let you weigh on this in terms of, I think the committee would need to make a recommendation to present it to the commission for the May meeting so that it could be adopted by the August meeting. So to the extent that these issues you brought up, Lee, are issues that the committee needs to weigh in on or approve, you probably need to have that conversation before voting to move it, recommend it. My point is, I don't think this can get sent back to the writing group, and then you guys aren't going to have another chance to look at it, unless you schedule a separate meeting specifically for that.
And I didn't, the stuff that I had, none of that was big enough to really be considered substantive. I think the issues that were kind of questionable, we've already discussed, and I think we've come to an agreement on. I'm okay with it, but just didn't know if anybody else had any other suggestions or comments or concerns regarding this course that we can kind of compile all this together.
Antonio, oh, I'm sorry, Sean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, I mean, it looks very, I read over it too, and it looks very comprehensive. It's just, I think the time it gets put into place, it's going to, some of it's going to be outdated, which is.
We're going to have to do an update if the SOPs are adopted.
Okay.
But, you know, the writing group had to move forward because there's a requirement to get it updated by September 1st. So who knows once we get into the SOPs if they'll be approved right today to move forward to them or not. So they just needed to move forward, and then you can always provide, I forget what the technical term is, Jen, that you, like a supplement, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, or an addendum. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And I think typically what has happened is a motion is made by somebody to move forward to the full commission with any recommended changes or revisions or something of that nature. And so that's something that, you know, we'll take, the writing group and the staff who are part of this process will take back the recommendations, make those revisions. And, you know, if Lee as a chair, if you want to take a look at them, you know, and sign off, or if you're comfortable with just making this motion here, we'll do that.
I mean, so
the committee could defer any sort of final recommendation to make sure those changes that you talked about were made to the chair if you wanted to, and then Lee could just say, yeah, this is what we talked about. And
I mean, the two things were probably the removing that signature word, and on the page 31 with CSST, changing it to particular instead of CSST system, CSST material type, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we just get rid of the particular, that should kind of, that just those two words will kind of clear that sentence up. Because I think the particular implies that they have to identify the specific type of CSST. I think just identifying CSST was the original goal of what everybody was wanting.
So removing
I will say, though, not to complicate things, I think Steve might have a point with the terminology system. I think saying material is significantly clearer than saying system, CSST system, because that implies something other than what it is. If you say CSST material, then you're actually talking about the piping material. I just, to me, that's clearer than system implies that maybe the whole system's that way, and that may not be the case.
I just don't want to imply to or insinuate to the inspector that they have to know exactly what type of CSST it is.
So I think taking specific and system out and just going what Steve said, like identify CSST material. I think that is probably a little more clear to inspectors moving forward.
Okay.
And the instructor's notes in that area may kind of elaborate the intent there.
Yep.
That's the idea. Okay.
And then the other one in module 3, changing from any reports to all reports. But yeah, I think that was it.
Any comments, Mike?
I'm good.
Scott? Brian?
Good.
Bruce? Good. We got two Scotts side by side. Oh, that's confusing. But yeah, so barring those comments, is that something we can just take a motion with
Yeah,
those
just-
comments and go.
Need a motion to forward those to the full commission.
Okay. Can I do that since I kind of,
Absolutely.
okay, I make a motion that we accept and forward to the full commission, the new, is it version 1 of the Legal and Ethics and SOP update manual?
With changes.
With the 3 changes that we've identified, as far as the signature, all reports, and the CSST comment.
Barbara just typed in second. I don't know if she can say if we can hear her, but she just said she seconds it.
I see that. So we have a motion by
Reading it
Steve.
into the record.
Absolutely. Motion by Steve, second by Barbara. Any further discussion on this item?
I just want to get some clarification. I do not believe this, because this isn't a rule, that this needs to go through the 2 meeting process. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong. I think if the commission adopts this in May, then you guys will start prettying it up and giving it to providers to start getting ready to present it by September 1st. It does not have to go back to the commission in August.
No, that's exactly right.
Okay,
It just
so I apologize for that.
This meeting, once that occurs, yes, we do all the fine tuning and all of that, and then we'll also develop a PowerPoint to go along with it. That does not need to go before the commission.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed this in the motion. Did it allow for non-substantive changes by staff?
It did.
Yeah, I had tacked that onto the end, sorry.
Okay, no, that's on me. Thanks.
All right, any other discussion on this item? All right, if we can do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, I can do that. Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes?
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara,
Barbara
Mike?
says
Yes.
yes.
Mike Morgan,
Yes.
Dave Motley,
Yes.
Scott Regan.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous.
Unanimous, motion passes. Moving on to item number 10, discussion and possible action to recommend amendments to 22 TAC 535.220, professional conduct and ethics, as proposed at the February 19, 2021 commission meeting. This is the one where we just put written consent. Is that not the case, Tony?
It is written consent. It went before the commission. I think there's one comment about this, but I believe that it's from a former committee member, but I think he's not quite. I think his concerns are not concerns that need to necessarily be addressed with this particular issue, because this is all just about signing that. I think just getting back to him and explaining what writing means and why that's there. But I'll let you guys decide on that. I don't know if everyone's seen the comments regarding this issue.
All right.
Because this particular issue is about third party, and it's not, I don't believe it is service providers. It's people who aren't service providers. So RESPA would not apply, because it's like, I think it's alarm systems. And am I wrong about that? I believe that's what this particular rule is addressing.
Well, alarm systems are one, and I think based on that comment that we received, that alarm companies aren't a part of it, but I've seen it to where it's, wood destroying insect companies and roofers, and so.
Right, but they're not service providers in the sense that RESPA would apply. Like, they're not, loan officers, title agents, any of that stuff. It's not people involved in the transaction of selling or buying the property. It's people that inspectors would have, that they would give their information to and have them come out and like you said, do a termite inspection or whatever. So I don't believe RESPA applies. And then the whole thing about getting a signature is just so there's an actual affirmation by the client that, yeah, I agree that you can do this, or I don't agree you can do this. So.
All right. So recommendation is to go as written as we've already, this is the second go round, right?
Yeah, unless you want to change it based on any of these comments, it would just be to recommend the rule to the commission for adoption.
Okay, so entertain that motion if somebody would like to make it.
Scott.
Scott would make that motion to propose for approval, and I saw a second by Sean.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, if we can take a roll call vote, please.
Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara,
Barbara said yes.
you, Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, motion has been approved. Item number 12, discussion and possible action to recommend amendments to the inspector report form and rule.
Skip number 11.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Discussion and possible action to recommend amendments to the inspector SOP. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself there a little bit.
I mean, if
Well,
y'all
'cause
just wanna just approve it, we can just.
I
go
say, I know
through it.
this one's going to take no time at all, and we're just going to breeze right through it.
Second. All in favor?
Hey,
All right,
Lee,
so- Yeah.
can I interrupt real quick? I've had a request from staff that I think we have quite a few people that are dialed in on their phone. And if any of them are attending with the intent of getting CE credit, this is an acceptable use of chat. Can you type in your name and your license number and provide it so that way we can get everyone who's here solely for the purpose of getting that CE credit? Everyone else can continue as necessary, but that's a good way to use the chat if you can. If you're called in and you can't do it, you can also send an email to general.counsel@trek.texas.gov, and I'll make sure that information gets in there.
Do you want committee members to do that as well, or you just do ours automatically?
I have no idea. This is the first time that I've known that this is a thing, actually.
So it's limited, right, Lee? The number of hours you can get per meeting. So you guys may have already earned your
Probably
for the year, but we will make sure you get your full allotment.
I am told that they do go ahead and cover the members. So if you're on there and you want to get the credit and you're just on phone number, you can email me. It's general.counsel@trek.texas.gov, and I'll make sure that goes to the right person. And we'll start. I'm chatting with staff about the potential of putting some sort of notice on the agenda for that. But it does look like they get the members to the extent you still qualify.
Cool.
All right, now for the big one.
All right, so Sean, I will let you go ahead and take this one.
All right. So, Lee, we need to go through it just like we did last time, page by page and discuss everything, or do you want to let everybody just propose questions?
Let's go page by page just so that we aren't bouncing all over the place and everybody goes from one page down to 10, back to 2. Okay. Let's just go right on down the list. And if anybody has a comment, because I have a feeling there'll probably be a decent amount of comments. If you're on the committee, go ahead and speak up. If you're not on the committee, please raise your hand, and I will keep an eye on the raised hand. I will keep an eye on the raised hand thing and make sure that we take a look at that. Sorry, I raised my hand on accident, but
all right.
Go ahead.
Okay, Tony, can you pull up, or whoever's running?
Yeah. No, I'll do it because I've got the Word documents up, so I want to make sure that any changes we make are made to those. So okay. Bear with me because I got to find it.
We're going to pull up 535227, which is standard practice general provisions.
Okay, let me get to the top. Oops. All right.
Okay, so we talked about this last time we brought it to the full committee. Requires the use of reasonable and appropriate tools to satisfy the requirements of the standard of practice. And then we went in here and talked about, we met again because there was some discussion to clarify about drones, sewer cameras. We just elected not to. After discussing with enforcement, we felt like that If you're going to utilize these specialized tools, you should have the training to be able to prove to or document to enforcement if anything ever comes of it. We left that in there. Any discussion about that? Okay, Tony, let's scroll down. So we just talked about here. Just again, we made clarification that if an inspector provides services beyond the scope required by these standards, including the use of specialized equipment or inspects components and systems in addition to the standards, the inspector must possess the competency to require to do so. So that was kind of our response to wanting to make sure that the inspectors are clear that if they go beyond the scope, that they need to be able to possess the competency. So if you're going to fly drones, you need to have your USA, whatever, your FAA Part 107 license. If you're going to do sewer cameras, you need to have some kind of certification showing you know how to do sewer cameras. All right. So if you want to scroll down to the next changes we talked about was 7. Gas distribution system. So we added a definition because we refer to it now in the SOPs. So we clarified that. And we have several different bullet points underneath there, just spelling out exactly what we're talking about in the gas distribution system. All right. 10 was report the inspector's finding regarding systems components for SOPs. So we just did a little housekeeping here. I think this was on here last time with no problems.
Right.
All right, let's scroll down to the provision. So again, we had no changes from the last time we presented this. Again, we're just clarifying that the inspector must, if he routinely departs, they should not start the inspection before the client knows this.
All right, hold on just a sec, Mr. Reinhardt.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, and maybe through the intent there is how minor of an item would qualify for routine. I mean, if it was,
Well, the intent was if like someone never gets on a roof,
that's big.
They need to depart from it. They need to depart. Go ahead, Tony.
I think Mike Malloy can weigh on this, but Steve, I would say if it's required by the SOPs and you routinely depart from it, I think you need to notify, even if it's small. I don't think there's if it's not that major, it's okay to routinely depart and not let them know. If it's required by the SOPs, I would assume you would need to follow this particular provision, but I'm happy to let Mike Malloy weigh in on that.
And roof is a biggie. I know there's a lot of people who would never test a TMP, and some of the items are kind of, I don't want to say kind of small. There's not too many things that would compare with, I don't go under a house or I don't go on the roof. But so the intent here, those would be in the, say, inspection agreement before you would perform the inspection or something. In some way, the client has to know that you're not going to do it. And if not, if you don't get a response, you don't do the inspection, so to say.
Tony, this is Tony Renteria.
Uh-huh.
I think Mike might have stepped away for a second.
Okay.
You're correct. This deals with a system or component that is required by the SOPs. So it either needs to be inspected or the inspector has to depart. So it's one or the other. And if the inspector knows that this is a system he or she is not going to inspect, because that's what they do routinely, then they need to inform the client.
Yeah. This is just a thing of transparency. It's not to cause any specific issues. It's just to there's certain expectations the client has, and want to make sure the inspectors are notifying the client prior to the inspection being done that this will not be inspected if it is required. That way, there's not any question after the fact that there was communication about that particular item.
Yeah, and I run into a scenario where the agent schedules the inspection on behalf of the client because the client may be overseas, and we never, I might send them an inspection agreement, and I guess my belief for my scenario is it would be in the agreement, maybe a section that says these items we don't do for whatever reason. And when they sign the agreement, even though I haven't spoke with them, that satisfies the intent. If I don't get anything, for me, I don't do the inspection without the agreement signed. So that fixes that. But for people that don't have an agreement, and some people,
or you can communicate through email, and you have proof that they opened the email.
Well, you need feedback, right? Or just does it just say notifies, not necessarily?
It just says notifies. So okay. I mean, I think just to be clear here, I think the intent is that it's a transparent notification. It's not just something buried in an agreement that while it meets the letter of the law, it doesn't meet the spirit of the law, so to speak. But there currently is not a requirement that you get a signature back from the client saying that they understand the notification. It's just that you have to notify them up front. And the thought there is, again, that you're not the day of the inspection letting them know, hey, I don't get on roofs when they've already hired you to do it.
Right. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on that particular item? Okay. Seeing, hearing none, go ahead, Sean.
All right, so that's it for the general provisions.
All right, I will add just real quick before we move on to structural. This is it, folks. I mean, I really encourage any input that y'all have. The SOP subcommittee has worked for a couple of years on this, almost 3 years now, to really get this done. These are all big changes, and this is kind of our last hurrah to make sure that these are done right. So if you have input, please, by all means, speak up, raise your hand, throw something, let us know. If we get something wrong, let's get it fixed now, because otherwise it'll be another few years before these SOPs are updated again. So I just want to encourage any participation that may be here. Go ahead, Sean.
Can we go back to the one we just talked about for a second, this notify provision? Sure. I take a little bit of concern from a consumer. If we're saying that an email is enough to provide notice, I don't really think that's what we're intending from a transparency. I can see if it's in the agreement, but just to say, well, I sent you an email with a delivery receipt and that qualifies as notice, I think that's really going a little farther than from a consumer standpoint we really want to be going. And so maybe maybe we can flesh that out a little bit more, the notify, notifies as part of the inspection agreement or something, because I take it to the point that the gentleman raised that, well, if you did it by email, but I don't think that's what we want from a consumer standpoint.
Well, I think the problem with requiring it in an agreement is that we're not required to have agreements.
Right.
And Trex not get involved with dictating what's in agreements. So we'd have to come out with a separate form.
Well,
which would be.
Then maybe it needs to say notifies in writing, because the other problem with it just says notified. That means I tell you that it's not in, I'm not doing it. And that's notification.
Well, I think that's what was brought up about the email. That's in writing.
But it doesn't say that here in 3. It doesn't say by email or in writing in 3.
But it doesn't need to be in writing either. What's to say that they don't call me up and I don't inspect roofs, and in that phone conversation say, okay, I'll be more than happy to do the inspection, but I don't climb up on the roof, in that verbal communication. I mean, that's notification the client knows. I mean, how do you prove that? Granted, should push come to shove, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds on specific types. I mean, the whole point is just that if you routinely depart from something that's required, We just have to mention that it's required that you notify your client. And at that point, the burden of proof is on the inspector to prove how they notified the client should that become an issue.
I agree with you. It just seems like it protects the inspector, say it's in writing, because then at least you got an email, a letter, something you can hold up that says, I told you, I wasn't going to do that, versus a he said, she said fight that I would expect the inspector is going to lose the bulk of the time as the professional.
I do have a question about that. Is there any burden? I mean, if this is something inspectors routinely depart from, we're not talking about something where you see something in the inspection and you're like, oh, wow, I can't get to that. But this is a routine, something going into an inspection you're not going to do. Is there any significant burden on the inspector to provide that notice in writing?
I don't think so. I think it's like Lee said. I mean, it could be done by your office when they're scheduling.
Yeah.
There could be, you could be an explanation. If someone doesn't check TMPs, there could be a verbal explanation on a recorded call or something, that they say, they go through every time, this is what we will check or whatever. I mean, we don't do that, but I'm just saying the inspector could have a routinely, part of his scheduling procedure is to verbally depart from stuff.
And the idea is give the client an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to go find somebody else who
does
everything.
That's exactly the reason.
Yeah.
And you want to have that opportunity before you commit.
Right.
Waste the time of the inspector putting it on the schedule, doing payment, whatever you do. It's an awkward first call conversation. I'd love to do your work. Oh, by the way, I don't do these things, but that's the intent. And I would assume most of the time the client has no idea what you're saying you don't do, unless it's something major.
Right.
I don't go on roofs.
And I'd be willing to bet that even if you do it verbally, and I think the question becomes, how do you prove it verbally? Now, I record all my phone calls, so that's how I do it. But if it's something that I routinely depart from, I guarantee you I'm putting it in my inspection agreement anyway. So at some point, whether it's going to be there, the client's going to have acknowledgement that is something that I routinely depart from, which I think is the intent.
And it'll be in the report.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the intent here is that, the client has the ability to take a step back and say, okay, well, I'm not going to use this inspector because I do want this looked at. Or they say, you know what, I don't care. Go ahead, go forth. But that they have the knowledge to make that decision. It's an educated choice.
And I think this was more of a housekeeping issue, because before it just said, we should do that first contact, and we're just clarifying here that, hey, you should not say first contact is a month after the inspection. First contact,
or the day of the inspection. I think this was actually it was a way to put a little bit of teeth into it to say, look, you gotta notify your client and give them an opportunity to make a decision based on that. If it's something, if it's not something that you see on the inspection, but something you always depart from, give them a little bit of insight on that, early insight on that.
Hey, Sean, this is good.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Hey, remember when we were doing this, we actually looked at, if we get insurance as an inspector, we have to provide our inspection agreement. And if we're departing from something, that actually is very important for the insurance company, but not one company out there will allow us to be an inspector without an inspection agreement. And this would be in our agreement. It would have to be in it.
Right.
But if that's the case, then it should be easy enough to just add notifies in writing with that insert in there, because if you're doing it to get insurance and it helps protect you as the inspector, I think that's a good add to that language.
But and I understand where you're coming from, because writing is always better. But if we do that, then we're restricting the inspector, that not every inspector gets an inspection agreement done prior to the inspection.
Then he takes the risk if he doesn't, if he's going to depart from the SOP.
But that's his completely his or her choice. In the end, the whole intent of this rule is to make sure the client understands of a routine departure, and they have the option to back up and say, I want to have another inspector do that. And I think by leaving it that general as far as just notifies the client, achieves that. I think if we really break that down into in writing, it further restricts. And like I said, it takes away from the inspector. It says on the phone when there's somebody scheduling it, hey, by the way, I don't crawl under PRME houses. I'm too old. I'm too fat. I just can't do it. And they don't want to do it. And if that client says, okay, well, if I record that phone call, worst case scenario, if they come back and say, well, I didn't know he was going to do that, I can play the phone recording. I have satisfied the requirement of notifying my client that I don't crawl under houses.
I understand that if you record the phone call, you would be protected as the inspector, but I'm going to bet 90% of the inspectors don't record their phone calls with their clients.
I record all phone calls. I learned that a long time ago.
Hey, that's good for you, but if we're making a rule, though, it seems that, again, to me, saying if you're going to depart, you got to give them an affirmative notice that protects the most people unless you're recording the phone calls. And I agree that you would be protected then. But, obviously I can be outvoted, but to me that seems pretty important if we're going to depart from the SOP that we're doing that in writing somehow, some way.
I understand where you're coming from. I think that the way it's written satisfies the intent. I just don't think actually specifying in writing, I think that might be going a bit too far in my opinion. So I'll just leave it at that.
And that's kind of throughout the throughout the SOPs, we're giving a general direction to the home inspector. So you have to do this, and we're not telling them specifically how to do that. Throughout the SOPs, like, we have back in the beginning of the general provisions, we're talking about using appropriate tools. So we've decided as a committee, and as in the past, we've done this where we don't list out every single device that the inspector has to use to accomplish these SOPs. We tell them this is what you have to do to protect the consumer, and we leave it up to them to do it. If they don't, then it can be addressed through education, it can be addressed through enforcement, but I don't think that's the kind of the spirit of the SOPs throughout here is specific direction on how to do something.
Okay. All right, other committee members, you guys want to weigh in on this particular item since this is one we've kind of spent some time on?
I dwelled on that for a while. If there was a way to word it for the inspector to be able to prove an acknowledgement, because the intent was they know, but it's hard to even get acknowledgement if you're teaching a CE class that they've received the information. You've given it to them.
Yeah.
And that's what the legislature, is what we have in the rule, is this they're notified, and in the past it was first contact, which was awkward sometimes because sometimes I will never contact the client.
Yeah.
Them to a third party. But in the sense of contact, we thought, okay, you're talking or you're seeing or something like that. So it's, contact can be, your only contact might be that inspection agreement if you do one, and that's contact. So unless staff, I don't know if the staff would have any information on being able to enforce or from a client about he never told me.
Okay, other committee members?
I like it like it's written. I don't think we need to be too specific.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've kind of beat this little section to death.
All right.
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay. Tony, if you pull.
Let me ask this. Do we want to the extent that there may be sections that need to go back to the subcommittee or whatever, do we want to take a vote on each of these as they come up so that we know, okay,
Yeah.
This is the area that, I'm just asking how you guys
I don't think that's a bad idea. That's what we did during the meetings. So let's just do a roll call on accepting or rejecting this.
Well, we have to, I would assume we'd have to have it in a form of a motion. Yes. to approve and forward to the commission for approval, the general requirements or the general provisions section.
And I think just to be clear so that we're able to send them all over at the same time, I think that the motion would be, and Vanessa can weigh in on this, the motion would be something like the committee making a motion to recommend sending this whatever to 335-227 to the commission for recommendation for whatever if all or when all the SOPs are finalized. That way, if you guys because it's going to be wonky to send them to the commission if the SOP subcommittee is still working on one section, but that gives the subcommittee some direction that they don't have to keep going back and looking at all of these again.
Okay.
So I don't know how you would word that, but.
All right. Well, before we do that real quick, Bruce Carpenter.
Yeah. I think we addressed this last meeting that we had as far as what we could do and what we couldn't, and how we notify our client on what's going on. I do most of my communications with text messaging, and in real estate sales, we do it by text message also, just to get something that they did acknowledge what we've got. What the problem is, you got a record of it whenever they send you a text message back. But back to getting on roofs, and the question is it acceptable to inspect a roof from the eaves around the perimeter of the structure if you can't get on the roof?
Okay, well, before we get too far into that, I think that's getting more into specific on the structural systems.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good question, and we can certainly have that conversation. But let's get through this general provisions first, and then we can revisit that question if that's okay. I'm not trying to cut you off.
Well, that's what I have a problem with. If we approve this, it's one thing, TPRV valve that you either do or you don't. And on a roof, can you inspect it or can't you?
Well,
if you didn't get on the roof.
I get what you're saying. But the roof, I get what you're saying, but the roof section is part of the structural systems, which we haven't got to yet.
Okay, but also on your inspection order agreement, I have specific limitations on what I can get on and what I can't, as far as pitch wise. And it's spelled out, and I always get a inspection order agreement signed before I even go forward or go out to the structure itself as far as the dwelling. So, that's the way I do it, and I've been doing it, and the reason I do it is because I don't want to get sued. And it's very easy to do if you do or don't do it. So you have to have something on record before you try it.
Right, and I think that's the intent here, Bruce, is that to give indication to inspectors that they all need to notify the client ahead of time. Mainly so, the point is that the client has a choice if they want that particular, like if there was a certain pitch that say someone else did, then the client would say, okay, well, I appreciate it, but I need that inspected, and then they can find somebody else who would do that. So.
All right, so let's on the general provisions. I would entertain a motion to forward to the commission for approval pending all SOPs get approved. I think is how we talked about that.
I make the motion that we forward to the commission section 535.227 to the commission, assuming all other sections are also approved.
Perfect. Got a motion made by Mike Morgan. Do I have a second?
I second it, Scott.
Seconded by Scott. Any other discussion on this item? Barbara says good idea. Yes, on section 227. All right, hearing no other discussion, roll call vote on this, please.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
No.
and Barbara said yes already in the chat. Mike Morgan,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
He had one nay.
Okay, so general provisions move forward. Sean, go ahead and please move forward with the structural systems.
Okay. Tony, if you'll pull up 535.228.
Yeah, let me do that. Oops. Second. Everyone can see it.
Okay.
Okay.
So during the last full committee meeting, we had some stuff that we needed to get improved here. We added the word insufficient for insulation.
Yeah, how do we quantify that, by the way?
Well,
That was.
So we
kind of my
do,
question.
we did get a comment sent this morning, and I know typically we don't address things that come in this morning, but since Lee mentioned that, the question was, is there a minimum depth?
I don't think there is, because it's up to the manufacturer on what they say the R value is. Something we could.
Well, the question is, if we're saying insufficient, it has to be relative to something.
Yeah.
And missing, and missing kind of always been a gray area. Is it missing from the point of the current standard to where it is, or is it missing where you see gypsum? And, you know, so if you saw 2 inches of insulation in a 50-year-old house, is there any missing? No, it's all covered, but it's sufficient, but relative to what? And you can't really say, you know, the question came up with a lot of code references. You refer it to the current standard, which means virtually everything would be insufficient.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at this from the, like, say, from an enforcement standpoint. If I'm an enforcement and somebody, you know, goes, there's 8 inches of insulation in there and they didn't mark that up as insufficient. I mean, from an enforcement standpoint, I think the clearer and concise this can be, the better. I think this leaves it very open and ambiguous.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you go into most old houses, you will see the ceiling joist. And if they're trusses, they're 2x4 ceiling joist, and that's not uncommon. And the question is there any insulation missing? And, you know, and always the definition, well, it's missing if you can see gypsum. If there's something there, then it's not missing. It just doesn't have sufficient.
I don't think missing's ever been an issue as far as enforcement goes or interpretation. I mean, everybody's been operating off that for a long time. I think the word, when we kind of directed to put insufficient in there, might have been an error in judgment.
I mean, I like having insufficient in there because I think we need to call that out. I'm just trying to look at it from the backside. How do we quantify what is sufficient and what is insufficient?
I agree.
And inches are not a way to evaluate insulation. It's
right.
a ballpark, but insulation is based on the volume of material over the square foot. It's not inches. So
and every material is going to have a different rating of depth.
Yeah. And so it is a very good, and then like a lot of things in the SOP here, it's a good intent, but how do you do it?
Right.
I like having it there as well, and it's the discretion of the inspector is what they think is insufficient, because you're right. If it's closed cell foam, open cell foam, fiberglass, they're all going to be evaluated differently, you know, and then to what code standard are then you evaluating to?
And we changed in our environment here. Most of Texas changed the R value, you know, in the last few years.
Yeah.
So the question, you know, what you run into between inspectors is the agent was like, you know, this inspector writes it up on every single house because insufficient to them is anything less than their R38 opinion, whereas somebody else may say, well, a house was built 5 years ago, R30 is fine, it's got it. So it runs into one of those where the inspector's going to, you know, I was going to say, have to kind of conform to the needs and at the same time give the client something.
Like I said, I like having that it's insufficient. What I don't like is the lack of enforceability on that. I think that's just, I mean, I don't know if maybe we can reword this to say noticeably insufficient or noticeably inadequate, something of that nature, maybe.
Lee, this is Tony Renteria. If I can have
Yes, sir.
A second here. I agree with you. Insufficient is going to be hard to prove. Like you said, when we have a set value or a set measurement, that makes it easier because then we know where the line is. But insufficient, like you're saying, if it depends on an R value, there's going to be some calculations involved, and it's going to be very difficult to prove whether the inspector did the right thing in calling this insufficient or did not. I think, like you're saying, I think you're kind of heading in a direction that what I was thinking is certainly you can note, what's missing or what's there. If you see something, you can describe it. That's pretty easy to do. And they used to do that. I think that's what we used to do before. They would say, I saw this amount of inches or whatever. So they would describing their observation. They can still do that and provide a recommendation. I mean, if we leave it open to provide a recommendation, then I think that's a little easier to comply. But saying this is insufficient, it calls for a judgment, it calls for a measurement, and it does leave it open to different possibilities. It leaves it ambiguous and it's hard to enforce.
Okay, I have a question to answer everybody. Can we just remove and insufficient and just leave it as missing?
As it used to be?
As it used to be.
Yeah,
I mean,
reporting the depth, average depth.
Well, that's above in the in section 1, in section A1.
I agree with Scott.
Just go back to missing installation, because this was brought up by people that weren't on the committee that wanted it this way.
I think we want it, just don't know how to implement it.
And that's my thing. I like insufficient. I just don't know how to word it to where it's actually going to be enforceable on the backside. And I don't want to create a whole other.
Is there a minimum standard that would apply to all insulation? In other words, like could you set something and then okay?
No.
Well, it's the value in Texas for the most part has been R30 back into the 70s.
Yeah, but there's all the material achieves R30 differently.
It requires the inspector to have some knowledge on how to calculate that. And
Okay, hold on before we go farther. Dave Motley.
Yeah, is there a way to say we observed this depth or this R value, current standards are that?
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what's in A1. So
that's what would be that would as a consumer, that would be more beneficial to me because I can decide if I want to put in more insulation.
I think report the depth, the average depth.
I think if the inspector wants to put that current standards are X, they can do that. But if we start putting that in the standards of saying that the current standards or the, then we start getting into more codes, and I don't, that's not the direction we want to go. But I would change D1A2 to approximate average visible depth of attic insulation, just to make sure that that little clarification is there.
I think that's all right.
What if you did that and said, and you pointed them to find out what the current thing is?
I think a lot of inspectors will do that and say, hey, current standards are this. I don't know if we want to put that in the actual standards that every inspector has to do that.
No.
Because what we're going to run into, I can already see it, is the 1950s house that has 2 or 3 inches of insulation in there. That was perfectly fine when the house was built. And in our preamble, we talk about, it already says there are areas of the house that were code when the house was built, but not code now. We took the grandfathering word out, but
then maybe you invoke that. Maybe you invoke that statement there.
Okay.
I think we just leave it the way it was. It's been working. We haven't had an issue with it. I understand the need to try to make people write up more insufficient problems, but I don't think there's a good way to put this in there.
They can always provide a recommendation. I think there's nothing wrong with that. The thing is, do we require them to do something?
Right. I would recommend we take out and insufficient.
I would agree with that.
I agree to that.
All right, well,
Do we want to, okay, let's leave that, and at the end,
yeah.
we can see if there's any other changes and then take a motion on all of it.
Yeah.
All right, so going down to the door section, during the last meeting, there was conversations about separating the fire, the garage door, if it's attached. So we went through here, we we clarified attached garage is not equipped with self-closing or automatic closing devices. And then we added 3, and then we went into the fire separation requirement. Yep, we renumbered. So 3 is all the stuff that was already in there, and then we added the self-closing. And then, Tony, you want to scroll down, just more housekeeping. When we got down to this, we added, nothing's changed for the absence of fall protection. We left that the same as the last time we presented it to you. If you go down to the fireplace, so what we did, and we'll talk about this in the plumbing section, there a lot of conversations and a need to put the ability for the home inspector to report specific gas leak or gas problems with that fixture. So if the fireplace has a gas component in it, that doesn't make up the gas distribution system, and has got a problem, then we would report it there. So we added that in every section that has potential for gas fixtures.
Okay, so I'm assuming the reason why we crossed off gas valve and location is because it's basically in that gas supply, gas distribution system area.
Right, correct.
Okay. All right.
So that was and that was it on the structural.
Okay.
All right.
So going back up to this, so the recommendation is to remove this, have it as normal. So I'm assuming that whatever motion to approve will be based on that language being gone.
Yes.
Let's try to do that first.
So I would entertain a motion to move forward on the structural systems of the SOP revisions.
A motion for 228 to go forward.
Motion by Scott, second by Sean. And do we have any other discussion on this item?
And just for clarification, that's going forward with the removal of insufficient, so the motion's clear?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. Just good to be there. Good to be on the right side. All right, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
No?
did Barbara?
Barbara says yes.
Yes, thank you. Mike,
Yes.
Dave, Scott?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't hear from Dave. He might have stepped away.
Dave Motley?
Yeah, I can't see him. All right. Well, we'll just call that an abstain then for intents for that. So that passes. We will move on to electrical systems. Sean.
All right. Tony, 535229. He's already got it. Look at that. Okay, so last time we brought this to the full committee, we were trying to find a way where the SOP would be more fluid, and we just decided that was not going to work. So what we've gone back and done, because we before we had in here at currently required locations. So what we did is we spelled out the locations in several different sections, and we took this verbiage, these locations, directly out of the 2021 code. So we added in your arc fault protection in the following locations. We listed all those.
All right, before you move on from that real quick, Steve Reinhardt.
Yes, my question is not, I like having it in there. My question is,
Okay, you're building up the suspense and then you mute yourself. I don't know how that happens.
I think he went away.
Somebody sniped him. Brian was on camera, so we know he didn't do it. he's trying to
Well played, sir. Well played.
All right.
He's back.
Steve, I don't know what you were trying to say, but you got cut off. All right, well, we'll come back to you, Steve.
Sean, just so everybody's clear, we looked at the 2015, 18, and 21 code on these to verify verbiage.
Yeah.
We went through all of them with current, looking at the state of Texas is under the 2015 as of now, and in 2000 September of this year, the state of Texas plus most other municipalities are adopting the 2020 code book. So we have that verification from electrician of the wording.
I also just want to say that, you know, if you think about the SOPs as something that provides minimum requirements for inspectors, you guys have the ability to determine what these locations that apply are. So even if there's code out there and it reflects that, I mean, this is what inspectors are required. If this goes forward, this is where they're required to look. So
we also spoke to builders about this as well, and other inspectors. So that was a big discussion about that. And I guess Steve's ready to talk now.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
all of a sudden the whole program closed and I was looking at my desktop and I went, oh crud. So the question is, my question was not locations and all that stuff. My question was the location of the comment, because both GFCI protection and AFCI have breakers and devices. So the question is, why is arc fault in panels and GFCI's in branch circuits? They both provide circuit breakers. They both provide devices.
Yeah.
They could be on either end because we have arc fault outlets now. We have arc fault breakers. We have GFCI outlets, GFI breakers. Should they be in the same location? And
yeah.
That was my question.
I hadn't seen the arc fault outlet, so I wouldn't even have thought that. So.
Yep, they sell them. They've been around. I've seen them probably the last 4 or 5 months.
But I mean, we've all seen the GFCI breaker, so that's a very good point.
So the question is just standardization. They should be in the same place. To me,
where would you suggest they go?
I would say branch circuits.
Yeah, because you're ultimately you're there, and the branch circuits, they won't always be in those panels.
Right.
Okay, so take this and put it in.
Yeah, right after GFCIs. I think that's where we had it about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
By the way, Tony, you're not sharing the screen anymore, so we can't see what you're doing.
And I just pulled up the code, and it's in the branch circuit section. So, hey, before you close out the main though, Tony, I got one thing in there.
Well, what about? I mean, laundry is GFCI. I didn't know in the new code laundry was listed as under the AFCI also.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Hold on a second.
Arc fault's kind of everywhere, but outside and in the garage.
Where would I put it in this list? Directly under the GFCIs?
I would, just for standardization. You know, it's kind of one protection than the next.
Well, put it. Yeah, there you go.
So it's going to be a 2, right?
By the way, this is the best part of our meeting.
Oh, stop.
Tony thinks I'm joking, but it's very educational to watch this.
I go back to grade school and where I was trying to renumber, outlines and how all that works, and I get so messed up by that. It's ridiculous.
Okay, so I moved that.
Auto formats 4.
So back up here, we're taking it out of this, and I'm adding this and back in, right?
Yeah. So I guess we also got to take the B out too. Inspector's not required to.
No, you don't want to testament their occupied homes.
Well, you can put it, put it in the branch circuit section though.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So where is this?
Right, go back up.
2B.
Yeah.
You going.
You
Right
don't want
here?
to prohibit
Yes.
this, so you don't have to.
There you go.
So this is currently in the SOPs, right? We're just moving this.
Yeah, we're just moving it.
Just so it's all in the same area.
I got you. Just... Okay.
And then
where would I put it down here under?
Probably right below where you added the whole section of arc faults, and then just put the inspector is not required to.
Well, it's got to be in here.
It goes right here where Tony's at. Just
Okay.
just put a G.
Put a new. Can it go under G or?
Yeah, just put it below that. Yeah.
Yeah, make it H.
Yep, there you go. And then after I was reviewing the my mind slipped, but the manual that we went over earlier, I noticed in there they were talking about bringing up the current language, 125 and 250 volts, which was what the current code calls everything. So I think we probably, if the course is going to talk about that, the SOP should probably reflect that. But I think, Tony, we need to change everything to 125 volt or 250 volts.
Right here?
I mean, unless anybody has a problem with that.
I think it helps with consistency.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a bunch of them in there, Tony.
There are?
Yeah, you gotta go.
You have to do a find and replace.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just put it in the top here.
There you go.
What was it? 240 with
250.
250.
250. There you go. All right. So then, if you keep going down to the branch circuit section, where we put all the AFCI stuff, we spelled out all the current GFCI locations: bathroom, garages, outdoor.
That's right here.
On and on. So obviously, as the years go on, this needs to be revisited from time to time and updated. This list.
Yep. All right.
And then if you go down, we added the absence of carbon monoxide detection. Keep going. There you go. And put the requirements there. We also, because there was a lot of conversations about the one situation where the 240 dry or the 250 dry receptacle was not tested. So we added language to clarify what we expect as a minimum requirement for the home inspector to do. So they got to report deficiencies in 125 volt receptacles. We talked about those three things. Those are not new, but then we add in there deficiencies in 250 volt receptacles by determining the presence of power. So all we're asking is for the inspector to use whatever means or tools they want to determine if power is present at a 250 volt receptacle.
Okay. And the numbering right below that's wrong. It starts with 2, 3, 4 instead of 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And then again on the next page. The little 6, then little 7, little 7. There are 2 little 7s there.
Okay. Yeah, I just need to look at that. Why that's that way.
All right. Anybody have any questions on the things that he's gone over so far? I believe that is all of the electrical, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So again, I think we've made some small changes.
Yep.
So we just need a motion to approve as amended and to forward to the commission.
I'm I second it. I think Sean moved ahead of me.
All right, so
Yeah.
we'll go with a motion by Sean, second by Mr. Carroll. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, take a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara,
Barbara says yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous.
Fantastic. All right, let's move on to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, please.
Okay. So we just clarified in here again that if there's an issue with the specific fixture at the related to gas at the heating system, it'd be reported here. We removed all this stuff because now it goes down the gas section. That was all there last meeting. What wasn't there last meeting was we had a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings about this. We tried to put in there a general thing the last time we brought it forward, and there was a lot of, conversations about enforcement and stuff. And so we went back, we met, and we had feedback from people outside meetings. We had conversations during meetings. So we basically said, okay, we're going to put a standard in here, but if the inspector decides he does not want to try to use deltas, that they can use some other type of industry accepted means of determining that the cooling system is working. ASHRAE has a standard where the system achieves a certain temperature during the day inside the house, but it needs to be prepared if they use a different system to determine it's working, that they need to be able to document that and present it to enforcement if anything comes about. The 15 to 22 was, we just basically polled everybody on the call. Most people are going with 15 to 20. Scott recommended we bump it up to 22. No one had an issue with that.
Manufacturers that I did research on that showed that was the number range.
Yeah. So if you're going to use a delta, it's going to be 15 to 22. If you're not, then you come up with your method and you report it how you determine the system was cooling.
Okay, real quick, Steve Reinhardt.
I love the intent, kind of like the insufficient insulation, but I'm not sure, and I'm sure, Lee, you read the continuing ed on the HVAC. I'm just concerned, and it starts with if it's, you measure. So one of the questions is you measure. The idea, and so if you go back up the top of the page right there, it says the inspector shall report. And okay, report type of system I got. The inspector shall report, measure the temperature.
Oh, yeah, that should
About
be.
the structure there, but so the inspector shall report the temperature difference is if that's what your intent, which I believe it is.
Yeah.
And so you're reporting a temperature difference. So if I say 10 degrees, at that point, I'm still good. I'm reporting. It doesn't say where I report. And that's a whole nother discussion is where you're reporting this, because it will vary, 5-8 degrees between lengths of duct run. So if you report it at the closest supply and the return, that's a standard. But if you report the closest supply and the farthest return, in the summer, it's always going to be less and it'll be out of the range. So the question is kind of like, how are you going to report? And then regardless of what I report, if it's out of 15 to 20, even if I can justify it, I still have to say it's a deficiency, even though I've written in 3 the extraneous factors, which are, it's a vacant house in Houston, the humidity is 98%, and there ain't no way that air conditioner is going to extract, it's going to extract all the moisture and not cool. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So the question is, how do you, even though you put in there 10 degrees and you said why it's 10 degrees, I'm still going to tell them it's a deficiency. I think the client might be kind of confused.
Well, I think when you read that, it's measure the temperature difference by between supply and conditioned air, or report industry accepted method used to determine performance. I think that encompasses both items that go right back down below it. I think it's giving you either or on both of those areas. You can either measure the temperature difference, and then if it's outside 15 to 22, that's how you can evaluate performance, or report industry accepted method and say it's a deficient or not based on whether it's industry accepted method on adequately cooling or whatnot. I think.
So if I use ASHRAE and I determine that 10 degrees is sufficient, I still come down to B and it says report as deficient, fails to achieve. I see what you're saying there. And the problem there is the ASHRAE. If you're using that method, you really got to be licensed because you got to get into the unit.
But the way they've written it actually achieves that because it has or under both of those statements there. You can use either or. You don't have to get hung up on the temperature difference.
I get it.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to address. Like we heard from a lot of inspectors that do not. Everybody has their opinion about deltas, and a lot of outrage about it. But we have to have. We were basically charged with coming up with something where enforcement has some way to say, okay, did you test it or not? So if you don't want to use a delta, then you have to document what system you did, because we had people that said they just see how the house feels. Right. I mean, how do you quantify that? But if they want to do that, then they need to be able to quantify. I walked in and I stopped sweating. So whatever they want to put down in the report, but it's up to them to be.
And we're not evaluating how the house feels. It's a system test. So regardless if the house is hot or cold, we're just checking the system. So in this scenario, I go in, I do a house, and I report that it has 10 degrees. I measure the difference, however we word that, and I say there's a 10-degree difference between supply and demand, it's supply and return, and there's nothing else in the section. I don't have to have a positive statement or why I think 10 degrees is good. I am complying with B22, and I'm not required to say I'm using that one. I just said 10 degrees is good. And I've seen inspectors that got in trouble where they put in the standard 15 to 20, and then they listed 10, and they were written up.
I think if you put the temperature differential in there, if you're going by A2 and measuring the temperature difference, then you have to abide by B21 and do that. If you're going on industry accepted methods, and you aren't going to make the exception, you just say by industry accepted methods, the unit is performing, and you don't put the temperature differential in there.
Right. But all three, 1, 2, and 3 are all required. Inspector shall 1, 2, and 3.
Right, but in 2, it's an either or.
Right here.
Steve, so I get what you're getting at in coming from that field. To understand, a lot of guys don't have the background that we're even close to, and they're not taught this way. So we looked at speaking with legal staff. We talked to a bunch of inspectors. I spoke with a lot of AC guys and a lot of inspectors. This gives you an A or B. Which way do you want to go? If you go one way, you're going this way. If you go another way, it gives everybody an in and an out. Plus, it helps with realtors understanding that this is part of our standards, because that's the big question that always comes about, that we always have to describe why we do it. Secondly, it helps with enforcement saying, how did you come to the achievement that the system was actually performing? So instead of having it the way it was wrote, is there was one way and one way only. Now we have multiple ways of looking at it. And it helps the consumer, it helps the inspector, it helps the industry and the schools. So we looked at it every which way possible. And this is something that Sean and I and Tony and sat and spoke about this record quite a bit because I did a lot of research on the AC side of it. And that's where we changed the temperature differential because of high humidity in different locations.
And
Does that help there?
I think I remember you having more hair on your head in our last meeting. Would it be a good statement to say if I'm taking that route, I would say under 2, just I used the ASHRAE method, or how much description do you want? If I want to report industry accepted method, do you want me just to say what method I used and then we're good?
System achieved temperature differential required by ASHRAE standards. You state it like that, and the temperature differential came in this realm, which meant that.
And just be prepared.
So, industry accepted methods. It could be ASHRAE, it could be Internashi's, it could be ours.
My guess is, and I think Tony can weigh in on this, Steve, if you put that in there and there's a complaint filed against you, what enforcement would do is just ask you, okay, you know, if they have any follow-up questions, if it's not explained, they just ask you what that meant. I don't think, I think that however that's reported is going to be adequate. And then if there is a complaint, enforcement would just follow up with the inspector to get some clarification on it. But again, I'll let Tony weigh in on that. But I think that's to, at least at that point, enforcement has kind of a baseline. Okay, they said they used this. What does that mean? And then the inspector can explain it. And then the enforcement determines, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's acceptable. It's not.
I think that's a true statement. I believe that would work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony. Yeah, if you're asking for enforcement's opinion, that is correct. It does say report, so they do have to report what method they use. So they should say something in the report. Now this is a new item that gives them that option to say, you know what, I didn't use the measurement. I went with this. And from our discussions, there was more than one method. So I think it's up to the person that reports it to determine what information they want to provide to the client in the report. And then if there's a complaint, and then we will look at whatever they reported. And of course, they'll get to supplement that information. Everybody gets a chance to respond to a complaint. So they'll be able to do that if a complaint is filed.
Can I ask a question? Does it make a clarification sense? Does it make clarification sense for on 2 here to say measure and report the temperature difference, blah, 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 and then or, because it just says measure there. I just don't want to leave any indication that that there's not a requirement.
You know, I think it changed because at the top we did have report. So I think we did intended to be reported. But now that we took it out, then I think we need to put it back in because it should be measure and report.
We also need to get rid of the word by in between, difference in between. There we go.
Perfect. That flow where I kind of test each one of these by reading the sentence broken down, I think that works. The inspector shall measure and report the temperature difference between supply air. Now, the word conditioned air, I always thought we were talking supply air and return air.
Yeah, it should be like return air and conditioned air, or supply and return, one of the two, but those are basically talking about the same type of air.
Well,
we went with conditioned air because when we got into the language, there was different ways that people can measure it, and there's no one that's specific, you know. So that's why we kind of left it open for the inspector to report the air that's being supplied. It's one type of temperature, and then the conditioned air, because where do you measure it? You know, when you get into where do you need to measure it, I think we didn't want to get in there. That was my understanding. We wanted to leave it up to the inspector to determine, you know, where they want to.
But the supply air is the air that's been conditioned.
Yeah, I agree.
The return is air that has not been conditioned yet.
Right. You're basically talking about the same type of air.
I see. So it should be return. I guess we need to.
The difference between the supply air and return air.
Yeah, supply air is conditioned. The return air hasn't been conditioned yet. It's heading in.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Should be returned.
Return air?
returned, not just
There you go.
returned.
Yeah, he got it.
All right. And then the rest of the stuff in the AC section has not been changed since the last meeting or presentation.
The only other thing on that is on page 30 of 55, where we're talking about cooling equipment when the outdoor temperature is less than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Right below that, can we put on the heat? I know it sounds stupid, can we put a 70 degrees Fahrenheit just so that they're consistent between the two sentences?
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's 70 degrees Celsius, we got a much bigger problem, but.
Well, and the other consistency is we don't spell out degrees on here, so we need to do that as well, right? Yeah. And Fahrenheit.
I mean, just trying to keep everything consistent.
I got you. It's so let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking to see how we did that. Right? No, that's not right.
Fahrenheit.
You spell Fahrenheit.
It's like 10,000 people
watching.
I know. No pressure, Tony. No pressure.
So
the governor's on here and everything.
Should that be the return air, supply and return, or returned?
It's returned is what they said.
Return yeah, I think air. The complete word, everybody calls it return, but I think technically it's the returned air.
Yeah, it's the air that's returned to the system from the conditioned space to be reconditioned and supplied back into the livable space.
All right, that is I can understand that. I think it's
all right.
Understood.
I think that is all now the way it needs to be.
All right, so I think that's it on the HVAC, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
And I'll make the motion. Same verbiage, just different section.
A second.
Does that work, Vanessa? Same verbiage, different section.
It's Groundhog Day.
Right. All right. Do we have any other? Not great. Do we have any other discussion on this motion? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear who seconded that one.
Scott. Scott.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I apologize. I should have reiterated that.
It's okay. Lee?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Barbara says yes. Okay. Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Okay, unanimous on that one.
All right. Moving on to the plumbing systems.
All right, 535231. Tony's got it pulled up. So we did make some changes since the last meeting. We added in here, we started talking about, since we're required to report certain locations of stuff, we were going to talk about, there was a lot of conversations during our meetings about requiring that the inspector report the material used for the gas lines. So we wanted to be consistent. Once we agreed to do that, we wanted to be consistent. So we put that in the plumbing section for the water supply and drain lines.
Sean, we did get a comment that someone wanted to add the word visible to those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, visible material used for water supply lines and drain lines.
That's fine.
And Steve has his hand up.
I just wanted, not anything to do with this, to let everybody know I've got a doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock, so I might be bowing out here shortly to prepare wife and I for the appointment. So if you disappear and wave, that's where I'm at.
You can call back in.
Well, from the doctor's office. That's
calls from the doctor.
You're gonna be waiting 3 hours in the waiting room anyway, so you might as well.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't affect our quorum. We're still good to go once I step out. I think we're unanimous. Just let you know if I disappear. Thanks.
All right. The other stuff, the highlighted stuff was in there before the last presentation. Also, the absence that was in there. So we clarified that gas leaks again associated with the gas water heater specifically, and then we removed the shutoff valve because that goes down.
Now, Sean, when you get into this, remember, this is something that we brought back from the old standards. A lot of the wording was.
Yeah.
We actually looked back and pulled things from the old standards when it was removed, so that some of the wording, it's not just made up. We actually looked back at everything else.
And a lot of this was, like Scott said, a lot of this was in there before we presented it last time. There was some discussion about checking the terminology on a few things and adding sediment traps. So we did add that.
We need to add visible to this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Where did we put the sediment traps down? There on the bottom. Lack of visible sediment traps on the bottom before we get into limitations. Again, we said lack of visible bonding on gas distribution system.
And I believe didn't we add the location of the gas meter?
So that was what was added during several people from the public joined, some other inspectors, and they talked about it being that they thought it was important for the consumer to know where the gas meter is. We report the location of the water meter already, the type of material used for the gas distribution center, so we added that in there. Since we're already changing the report template, now's the time to do all this. Any discussion?
The only little one I had was that back at the very beginning, it says a lack of N visible. Should be just get rid of the N. It should be A visible.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. Mike Morgan was hammering us pretty good when he jumped on. He got a lot of our grammatical stuff cleaned up.
I'm good with the rest of it. This should be, I think it's an interesting change. I think it really clarifies it. And there's going to be some overlap. There's going to be some people that put stuff in the gas section and in the appliance section, I'm sure. But I think in the end, as long as the client is aware of any deficiencies that's part of that system, should be okay. All right. Anybody else have any other changes? All right, then I will entertain a motion to forward for approval of the plumbing section.
I make that motion.
Motion by Sean. Was that you, Scott?
Yes, sir.
All right, motion by Sean, second by Scott. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve. Did he leave?
I think he's gone.
Okay, thank you.
But he did give a comment.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara say yes.
Yes, Barbara said yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
and Scott.
Yes.
Okay,
All right, so we'll pull up 535232 appliances. Most of this is all, so we moved, again, this is same from the last presentation. We moved all the general provisions just to be consistent down the bottom. We added the word visible in a couple locations. We changed, and there was a discussion about that mode. So we operate dishwasher. We just took out, last time we presented, we had the type of mode it should be, and we took that out. Down the range, we had some discussions about that. We left that the way it was. We had trying to go back and forth through my notes.
Aren't the exhaust fans required in the laundry room also?
No.
Thought I saw that they were. Okay.
Let me see.
I think this was added, the mechanical ventilation.
Okay. Yeah, we did add that, yes. Clarify the location. Scott?
Under garage door operators, number 5, detachment device is spelled wrong.
I was spelling it the British way. Thank you. And that was added as well from the last time.
Yeah, we added a bunch of stuff with the garage door opener or operators. Mike was kind of providing some insight on what they were putting in the training module, and so we talked about, because you just talked about inoperant units, problems improperly installed or operating photoelectric. So we added the auto reversing mechanism and a detachment device.
And then you also added 6 and 7 to the inspector is not required to.
Yeah. So there's a whole list of like optional things or appliances that we talked about putting in here, but we felt like that we should leave those as optional, and they can be moved down to the other section optional.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution to that. All right, any other suggested changes on the appliances section? Okay, hearing none, entertain the motion to forward for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Sean.
Second.
Second, I think, by Scott. Any other discussion on this item? All right, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara said yes. Mike?
Yes.
Dave? I didn't hear anything from Dave and Scott.
Yes.
Whoops. Dave says yes.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, that's everyone except Steve, who's no longer in the meeting.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to optional.
535233. The highlighted area was changed last presentation. Just we don't have to report the performance underground zone. We put back in there the absence of GFCI protection since we're specifically calling out locations now. And then we put that back in. We took out the word septic. That was in there last time, and then we added in at the bottom other built-in appliances. Like I said earlier, there was conversations about vacuum systems and trash compactors and built-in refrigerators and blah blah, on and on and on, and we just decided that we were going to put it in the optional. If the inspector has expertise, they want to report it, inspect it, they can do so in this section.
Okay. Any changes anybody would like to suggest on that section? All right, so, whoop, hang on.
Oh, we got a question.
Shannon Gatewood.
Let me share it, sorry.
Afternoon, I guess at this point, Shannon Gatewood. My only concern on the optional systems is that we don't have to put them on the report at all, put that section on the report at all. So you leave some possible questions on whether something was inspected or not as far as a built-in appliance.
Yeah.
I feel like there'd be a better option to just make that a mandatory section, and you can just put NP down NI down the entire section. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, we talked about that. That came up in a couple of our meetings, and what we went back and forth on mandatory, putting the optional things in there. If not, we just felt like, again, it was like kind of like what we talked about earlier. Allowing the inspector to make his decision on how he's going to not report that he didn't inspect those items. So if they want to put it up on the top, or they want to, include the optional items section, we were going to leave it up to the inspector and not require them to put the section on the report.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to approve the optional items.
I'll make it.
Motion.
Motion by Sean, got that in first. Here a second.
I'll second it.
I think I heard Brian Carroll get in there first on that second.
It was not me, but I'm fine to second it either way.
Oh, sorry,
It was Bruce.
Oh, sorry, it was Bruce. Both their microphones opened up, so I couldn't tell. All right, so second by Bruce. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara said yes.
Yep.
Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes. Steve's there.
Steve's on the call, Amber.
Yes, too.
Steve? Oh, Steve. Okay.
I'm listening kind of just off screen here, getting ready.
Okay. Was that a yes or no
Yes.
for? Okay. Thank you.
All right, so that finishes up item number 11.
So just for clarification, all of these will be moved forward and recommended to the commission at the May meeting based on the amendments that were discussed today.
Correct.
All right. Okay.
Huge thank you to the SOP subcommittee for that. I know this is a long, drawn-out process and a lot of debate. And public, current committee members and former committee members like Doyle Williamson, who has made a lot of input on this, so it's greatly appreciated. I know it's a tedious process, so thank you guys.
Yeah, just echo what Lee said. Thanks for all the inspectors and public members that jumped on the phone or every other week meetings or whatever, however we are meeting. So there's a lot of work put in, and I appreciate everybody's help.
Perfect. All right, so let's move on to item number 12. Discussion and possible action to recommend amendments to the inspector report form and Rule 22 TAC 535-223 standard inspection report form.
Which do you want to take up first, the rule or the form?
Let's take the rule first.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing was just there, so long as the standard report form is provided before that information. I think that was kind of the big one, right?
Yeah.
And then just making sure that if inspector uses computer software, that they have to reproduce the text verbatim and the spacing, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the part you're talking, there we go. Oh, attached.
Yeah.
So we're just clarifying that the track report has to be delivered, REI 7-6 has to be delivered prior to other stuff.
Yeah. We did receive one comment on the rule. I will not read that comment.
What? Have you thought about that, Lee?
Yeah, I've thought about it.
Is it in the materials? I apologize.
Yes.
I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in the materials. Colorful language aside, the points that were made, I took into consideration, but I will not read that one off. Anybody have any suggestions or comments in regards to the rule, the proposed rule change? Nope. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to. I want to do that. Let's do these separately, the rule and the form separately. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the rule changes or forward for approval to the commission.
This is Mike. I will make a motion that we approve the rule changes for the commission.
Motion by Mike and second by Sean. Oh, never mind. Barbara beat you to it. Barbara got the second in there.
There you go.
Any other discussion on this rule change? All right, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Steve, Bruce,
Yes.
Brian, Barbara, did she say yes?
Barbara said yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Okay, just check one more time. Steve? Not, I don't think he's there. Brian?
He says yes. He gives a thumbs up.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the standard inspection report form, the new 7.6 or 7-6.
I'm pulling up the marked up version.
Yeah,
I know it may be a little difficult to read, so but I just wanted everybody to see that. So
on the second page where
Yes,
we
sir.
have the bullet points,
uh-huh.
I mean, that second bullet point seems kind of moot.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Oh, I see what you're saying because of the first.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
that was the
Weeds
only
on this
change.
stuff. You get in the weeds on this stuff and you don't see all that all the time.
Well, when you look at it, 500 times, it all starts to blend together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
The only change is really on the body. It's just housekeeping of all the stuff we added and changed.
Yeah, there is a and the subcommittee looked at this. There's an annotated version of the current report form that shows where all the new language, where it mirrors or not mirrors, but where it comes from in the old report form to make sure, they looked at that to make sure there wasn't anything missing. And then one of the comments that was just want to bring this up, one of the comments that was brought forward at the last full committee meeting was about these bullets being an issue because it says you have to mark, the new language says they're marked as deficient, because what the current report form does is it takes the, I forget what the form is that is optional, the OPI, I think, and it just takes that language and puts it in here. This actually makes this more appropriate for the report form. It's not just mirroring the OPI, and the subcommittee looked at this, and there aren't any bullets on here that the SOPs would not require you to mark as D anyway. So they felt that language was appropriate. So I just wanted to bring that forward because that was a concern last time.
We took out the grandfather.
So is your intent on this under the optional section to put we had added the other appliances as part of the standards change? Is your intent to just say to have them put those in the other section, or did we want to put other appliances? Because it's just optional systems. Do we want to put other appliances, or do we want to just leave that the way it is?
Well, because sometimes people put all kinds of things that are not necessarily appliances in there.
It's a valid point, Lee, because other is, I think, for other things that you want to add to that particular section. So since it was added, it might make sense. It might be clearer if you add other appliances under F and have a new section for other.
Yeah, like have G as other and F be other appliances.
Yeah.
I said, just because we added that in the rule, I just want to make sure it's kind of consistent with the report itself too. So
yeah, that's a good point.
What do we call it? I forget what the actual terminology is.
Other appliances.
Okay.
We can say other appliances and other systems if you really wanted to, clarify it. But
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Built-in appliances.
Yeah. And then just have other below that?
Yeah, as G.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
It needs to be, so that's a new. There we go.
All right. Any other suggested changes to the form? Oh, I can't wait to see all those disciplinary actions come in for people not using the right form for 5 years after this goes out.
Someone said there's a comment about other built-in appliances, but those appliances not necessarily always built in.
Right, that's why I didn't verbalize it like that, yeah.
Well, Shannon typed that note in there.
Well, the in the SOPs, the title is other built-in appliances.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, if we're gonna make it consistent, that's probably I see that point.
Okay, so other built-in appliances.
Yeah. So I guess we would put non-built-in appliances in the next section.
Well, there's no current requirement in the SOPs for
non-built-in
appliances. It's just for the built-in.
Right.
Well, it's not a requirement for the built-in either.
Well, no, I know, but I mean, it's specified in the other section as built-in. There's no specification for things that aren't built-in.
Yeah, that's the point Shannon was making. My point was to keep it consistent. Shannon brought up a good point, saying it's in that section that we add. It says other built-in. So
and I think the reason why that makes sense is because if I'm buying a house and it has built-in appliances, there may be an expectation that those would be looked at by the inspector. So I think that's why it makes sense for built-in. Things that don't convey typically aren't inspected, so a refrigerator that's not built in or something like that. Yeah, I don't know if there's an expectation that that's looked at, but a built-in refrigerator, a vacuum system, a trash compactor, that stuff kind of, would be.
That and I think it also clarifies to a client when they, if there's a built-in refrigerator there, some may expect us to be inspecting that, and with that specifically being in the optional system, I think that protects us as well.
And we did not make a conforming change to remove septic up here. We need to do that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I think we got that one. Entertain a motion to approve the new 7-6.
I make a motion to approve 7-6.
Motion by Scott.
Second.
Second by Mr. Emmerich. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Okay, Lee,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
I believe Steve is gone. Bruce,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Barbara said yes.
Barbara said yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, Steve's on, but he's just got his fake work background going on behind him. So,
Right. Just to clarify, so everyone knows what the expectations are. These will be brought forward, the SOPs in the report form, and the report form will be brought forward to the commission. They'll be proposed. The commission will either propose them, or they may send them back to the inspector committee. That's happened before. If they do propose them, they'll be open for 3 months for comments. So there may be another. This may not. I'm just saying, I don't want everyone to think that this is over with, because you may have to go back and look at this based on comments and other concerns. So
yeah, because even though we've tried to be as public as possible about these changes coming and entice involvement, a lot of times people freak out when they see it's been proposed and all of a sudden come out of the woodwork. So let's see, best case scenario, we propose these, they go to the May, they go for 3 months, then they get August. I would say the earliest adoption would be what, January?
Well, that's something the committee needs to think about in terms of that. I will look at, and I apologize, I should have done that before this, but we have some time. I'll go back and look at how we handled this previously in terms of going from one report form to another to make sure we're consistent on how we handled the transition. So I'll bring something back to the full committee in July because I don't, again, I'm not GC here, so I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think the date for the effective date can be attached to the adoption of the rules. It doesn't need to be part of the proposal.
Okay.
Is that right, Vanessa?
Yes.
Okay.
I always have a hard time remembering that one. I think that's right, Amber, right? You don't have to actually slate the effective date until it goes for adoption.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Item number 13, update on displaying inspector addresses on the Trek website.
I can talk to that. So after the last meeting in July, there was a request that staff really look at a way to do this, and the inspector committee brought up some concerns about the fact that a lot of the industry members, their home address is their business address. So we went back, took a look, and it was an easier fix than we thought. And I believe as of the end of February, every inspector license holder is displayed on the Trek website, but the street address is not displayed. So the name, email address, phone number, and the city and zip code are on there so that someone from the public can go onto the website and do a search, but the actual street address for that inspector license holder is no longer displayed on the website.
Perfect. So yeah, that's a good clarification, because I think there was some indication after the last meeting that you would have to request that. So now that we know that just all the inspector license across the board has just been taken care of, I think that is a good thing.
Right.
All right. Request for future meeting agenda items. Anybody have anything they want to throw on the agenda for our next meeting other than, the SOPs and the report forms and the stuff that's being proposed?
Depending on what happens with the legislature, we'll have to discuss how to implement probably some of the changes to the real estate inspector license being repealed and the recovery fund. Yeah, we'll need to look at that to see what rule changes need to be made. Staff will bring those to your attention then. But I'm just offering that up as that needs to be on the next agenda, likely.
Okay. Any other items for future agenda? All right, number 15, discuss some possible action regarding future meeting dates. I think we had the 3 suggested dates that were there. I think we talked about it the last meeting, but it's never a bad idea to reiterate. Monday, July 12th, Monday, October 11th, and Tuesday, January 18th. Anybody have any issues with those dates as proposed? Over 11.
I think Lee is frozen for me. Is he frozen for you guys?
July 12th, I am gone. But as long as there's a quorum, you guys can keep chugging ahead.
Okay. Vanessa, you are correct. It looks like Lee is frozen. Unless he's staring very intently at his calendar.
Right. I actually had to watch that for a few seconds.
Okay, so Brian, you're not available on July
12th.
Reach out to Lee.
I think Lee was good on the. I don't think anybody last meeting had any problems with those, other than Brian. I potentially have something in October, but I'm not going to mess with it right now.
Did he dial off the meeting? Did we lose him completely? It looks like we did. That means the gavel passes to you, Sean.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody else is good with the 12th. Should we look at an alternative date, Tony, or do you have any idea or feel from Lee? Steve, are you good with the 12th? Scott?
Oh, Lee just said he lost his internet.
Okay.
So let me ask him
if he's good with the 12th.
I'm going to.
I think I was the only one last meeting that was out on that date, and so I think you guys are good with the 12th.
Okay. Well, I think we'll just keep those dates, and we can adjust October and January if we need to. But we'll keep July 12th for sure.
Okay. Do you know, Sean, if the October and January date look good, it will help me the farther I can book out to lock those dates up?
Okay. Does anybody have a problem with October? Or I potentially have a problem with October, but I can't say for sure, so I'm not willing to push it.
Lee is okay with July 12th.
Okay. Ask him if, I guess ask him if October and January work. Does anybody else have a problem in October, January? No. Okay. We'll keep those dates. Steve, I can see you. If you want to shake your head, yes or no. Okay, he's good. And Lee's back.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Well, he's trying to.
Let me let him in.
Here he is.
Sorry.
I think we got all the dates. I think we're just going to stick with the dates that are on here. Brian's the only one that's conflict in July, and everybody else is saying October and January. Okay.
Okay. I apologize. I have guys working on the house right now, and they tripped my GFCI and killed my internet. So I'm using it on my hotspot on my phone.
Brian, I don't want you to feel like if once you get the materials, if there's any concerns or issues you have, you can send them to general counsel and to the chair, and they'll be discussed at the meeting.
Perfect. That worked.
All right.
All right. Anybody else have anything? All right. Well, good deal. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get this knocked out and be able to breathe a little bit for a while. So thank you to all the guests and everybody who's provided input. Mr. Kessner, I did see you there. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. And hopefully I will see you all in May. And hopefully we'll all be in person at our July meeting. So that'll be great.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, Lee.
With that
Thanks,
being
everybody.
said, you bet.
Thank
We
you.
will adjourn at 12:34. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Have a good day.
Thanks. All right, you too. Bye.